All right, connecting to the Power PMAC. So if you haven't already, plug in your demo boxes. It looks like everybody's demo box is already plugged in. You'll be able to tell that the Power PMAC is fully powered up because there's a little power LED on the Axis cards, on the Axis interface cards that will come on. It says PWR power. That will indicate that the Power PMAC is fully up. On some of the older style CPU, which we call the 460 CPU, there will be two Ethernet ports. The top Ethernet port is the main communication port. On the newer style 465 CPUs, which some of you may have, there's only a single Ethernet port, so there shouldn't be any confusion as to which is the communication port. Unless, of course, you have the EtherCAT option, then there will be two ports. But they'll always be labeled ETH0 and ETH1. ETH0 is the main communication port. So when you first start the IDE, it's going to bring up a dialog that is requesting what IP address you want to communicate at and what type of protocol. I would always leave the protocol at the defaults. There's no reason to change it. We really need to communicate it with the SSH protocol, with the security that SSH offers. And then the IP address of your card. Now, I believe everybody's Power PMACs should be at the same IP address. Every one of these computers has its own NIC card, so everybody should be able, so we're not all connected on the same subnet. If we were, then everybody could have a different address, and anybody would be able to connect up to anybody else's Power PMAC. That's what our software group upstairs does. Everyone has shared connectivity so that they can do all of their what-ifs, all of their programming experiments. Fortunately, I'm not connected to that same subnet, so I'm protected. And everybody here is on their own subnet, so it shouldn't be an issue. So basically, the default settings that will come up in the communication screen, device options apply to all controls is true, and select device at startup is true. It asks you when you first start up the IDE, which IP address do you want to connect to, instead of just automatically connecting to whatever the last one that was there. Although you can change that so that if you know you're only going to communicate to the same Power PMAC every single time, you can set that select device at startup to false, knowing that you had selected the proper IP address with the proper protocol, and then it'll just bring up the IDE at that address every single time. Now, when you first get a brand new card, it's always recommended to do a complete save and reset. In other words, $$ is a command to Power PMAC to completely erase everything that is in volatile memory, and then a save command will take that completely erased volatile memory and write it to the flash, overwriting whatever was last saved in flash, renaming it, of course, to another one called user flash dot 1 through 5, depending on how many times someone had typed save before on that Power PMAC. And then another $3 will act as a power cycle. So it'll cause Power PMAC to go through its restart process. Not as much as if you powered up from a complete power down state. That actually goes through all of the Linux power on sequences. The $3 only resets the PMAC real-time kernel inside of Linux. Linux doesn't go through a restart. There is a command you can do in Power PMAC called reboot, which will restart the Linux if for whatever reason you need to restart the Linux. We'll talk about that a little bit later on when we get into the C programming part of Power PMAC.